All right. Good evening. It is 5:01 p.m. I'm Rob Watton, Chair of the Public Safety Committee and Committee of the Whole meeting this evening.
And with us, we have Council Members Kara Christensen and Council Member Dr. Catherine Cotton. I call this meeting to order. First of all, council members, do I have approval, a motion? Ooh. We good? Do we have a
motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Council Member Christensen, second by Council Member Cotton. Any changes, additions, corrections to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, the agenda will be approved as presented. Next, we move on to public comments. And for those joining at home or watching this later, we always welcome comments by email. You can send those to the city clerk or to the council members. Or if you show up in person, you can address us in person. And I do not see anyone other than staff and the council members of the committee here. So unless I have any objections, unless somebody wants to step up and partake in public comment, I will close public comment for this evening. Public comments is now closed. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes dated April 15th, 2024. Council members, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Council Member Cotton and second by Council Member Christensen. Any comments, changes, additions to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes will stand as approved. Well, that brings us to the exciting part of tonight's agenda. And I'm going to call on Police Chief Lynch to introduce our esteemed guest this evening.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me and giving us an opportunity to bring someone that I thought would be an interesting person to bring up and speak directly to the members of the committee. I was lucky enough a few weeks ago to attend a meeting at Echo Glen, and it was a security update of all the things that they've been doing. And I was so impressed with what has been taking place up there that I've invited the superintendent, Dan White, to come up and actually give this briefing in person. So he has been the superintendent at Echo Glen since December 1st. And as we all know of the issues in the past, what I see now and the actions that he's taking is to move this facility into the future and to make it safer, not only for the children that are housed there, but also the surrounding community. So I'm going to give over the microphone time to Superintendent White.
Well, good evening. Thanks for having me today. So I just wanted to kind of go over a few things just about, and I'll be as brief as possible. We all know the history of issues that have occurred at Echo Glen over time. I was hired December 1st, and the weekend before I started there was their last escape. I take that very seriously. I come from the Department of Corrections. I was there for 26 years and have some knowledge about how to operate a secure facility and all that goes into that. The biggest challenge at Echo Glen has been that there's no perimeter fence. So it's really difficult to contain things when there is no physical barrier to prevent that. So my mindset immediately goes to, doing everything that we can do to institute physical security practices without, to supplement the fact that we don't have a physical barrier. So that barrier is coming. It can't come fast enough. If I had skills, I would build it. But I did, in the materials that I provided today, I did provide there's a couple of things that I want to point your attention to. The first couple of pages talks about an update on the fence, the status of the fence building. First of all, I'm really grateful to the city's support of the efforts that we're trying to do. I'm told that things are moving along a lot smoother than they would have been without your support. So whatever's happening there, I appreciate. So there's kind of a general timeline down there related to what we can expect to get to having an offense. So yeah, it looks like later on, more fall-like, we'll start looking at actual work occurring that will look like they're building a fence, and more of substantial work in next spring and summer. We are gonna put a mock-up fence. There is a section that is being manufactured as I speak, and I think will be there sometime in June, that will be installed just outside the public entrance of Echo Glen. It will be about I think it's about an 8 to 10 foot stretch of, and in your packet, there's dimensions and such of what that fence is going to look like. That will be an actual panel of what the perimeter fence will be. So it will be there, and the public's welcome to come take a look at that. And that is what we will expect to have fully installed in 2025 as our physical barrier. With that comes a major control and all the things to operate that safely. So I want to go into really quickly some of the measures that we've taken since my arrival there. That's the next section of your packet. Much of these things are due to partnership with Security Services Northwest. They've been a great partner to us. We contracted their services prior to my arrival. And then when I got there, I met with their team and asked for some considerable expansion of the services there, especially after the last escape. And this packet outlines kind of the things that we've done to address that. We have 2 officers at the front gate 24/7. There's roving patrols of various, there's a canine officer certain parts of the day, and 24/7 officer foot patrols. We have other security that are wandering about, particularly focused on the perimeter of the facility. Again, that's our in the absence of a fence. I call it a people fence. It basically, our physical beings are keeping people on the grounds. Our entry point scanning, if you come in to visit us, it's pretty extensive, a lot like going to the airport. Everybody goes in the door, you basically take all belongings off, shoes included, coats and such, empty your pockets, and there's also a search randomizer. So if you hit that button and it turns red, you got to go then through the body scanner to have another layer of inspection prior to entry. And that's that happens 24/7. Echo Glen's campus typically has been pretty dark over time, not a lot of auxiliary lighting. And it was one of the things that I noticed right off the bat, my first day there, actually. It was dark when I arrived, and it was really dark on the campus, and prisons should never be dark. I know the word prison hasn't typically been used with a facility like that, with youth living there. I consider what we have to do security wise, though, in line with what we do in our state prisons in terms of physical security. It shouldn't be different. It has to be the same. And so that's what we're moving to. So I brought in some, with my partnership with Security Services Northwest, brought in portable lighting, 5 giant lighting towers that basically supplement lighting on the campus so that kind of areas that where people would move and walk around or such at night. It's all illuminated now. It looks really good at night. We also recently installed some wireless seismic ground sensors. Those are strategically placed on the perimeter. So basically what happens there is on approach to the perimeter, if somebody were to head that way, the sensors would be activated. That triggers a light tower that has a camera and sends a signal to a 24/7 control center that dispatches Security Services Northwest to the site of that so that we can have an immediate response to that potential breach. There's also a map in your packet that kind of talks about the different layers of security that we've done there and patrol zones that we've initiated. It's the best that we can do physical security wise to, keep our campus secure and the youth that live there. Again, 26 years serving our state prisons, just deploy that knowledge to trying to make the campus there more safe and more secure. That includes, getting our staffing levels raised considerably. And also doing some retraining around security practices and security awareness. That goes a long way when it comes to, defeating complacency and distraction and other things that hinder, running a safe, secure institution. The other thing we've done recently is April 15th, we did initiate a restriction on bringing in personal cell phones. So no staff member on the campus brings in a personal cell phone anymore. They're secured in lockers in our hallway. We purchased and installed new lockers for cell phones, keys, wallets. All of those things now are stored in our public access building. So, and we just continue to look for other ways to make our facilities safer. Happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Superintendent White. We certainly appreciate your time tonight and your leadership and being sensitive to the needs of the community. Council members, Councilmember Christensen, you've had a couple opportunities to meet. Do you have any follow-up questions or comments?
Well, I appreciate all of the steps that you've put in place since coming on board. I know that you inherited a number of needs at the facility, and I appreciate the technology that you've added as well as the commitment to go forward on the fence. I'm pleased with what you've done so far, and I look forward to the rest of it coming through. I don't think that I would have any additional questions that I'd raise right now here.
Right.
But I do appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. Councilmember Cotton.
Well, I'm sorry that you did inherit this, but I'm happy to hear that there's been no more escapes since you've come on board, and certainly putting your expertise to work and making this a secure facility from within and from without. And so it's definitely something that we've been waiting for a bit. So I'm very happy about that. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Administration, Mr. Chambliss. Superintendent White, thank you so much. And look forward to having the chance to work with you, and don't hesitate reaching out to us if we can be of support as well. We deeply appreciate your commitment to improving the facilities and I know staffing wherever you're at, any type of business, it's tough. So thank you much.
Yeah, appreciate your support again. It's a beautiful campus and would welcome you out to visit anytime, just to put your eyes on the things that we're doing. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Much. Right. I think this goes back to Chief Lynch.
Uh-huh.
Or standards of cover. Is this Oh, Chief Bailey. I didn't have a fire or police by this, so I'm trying to figure this out. Okay.
Good evening. I just wanted to kind of close the loop on what we talked about before. I know all of you were in the out briefing meeting with the accreditation people, so you had an idea where we're going with that. And when I spoke with you a couple weeks before that about the new version of the SOC CRA, the community risk reduction or community risk assessment and standards of cover, I presented it to you and I mentioned after the visit that we might want to adjust it, and then we were going to decide on, or you were going to decide on whether it needed to go to the full council. So I just really, briefly wanted to close the loop on that. There was no, at this time, there was no major changes that they saw with it. They thought it was a good document. There's some minor changes that they wanted us to add a little bit more information. We haven't seen the final report from them yet. So I don't know if there is anything for sure, but from what I was told, there's no changes to it. So I just wanted to get back in front of you to find out. My recommendation is that I don't think we need to make any changes. The minor stuff that they wanted us to change to me seems appropriate to do at the end of the year, just as an update to it. Since we're already partway through the year, it doesn't seem necessary to me to necessarily go in and change it again and approve it. But again, I said I'd bring it back to you, so I wanted to see what your feelings were on it. If we wanted to, they wanted to just add a little bit of gap analysis to it, sometimes that show where our standard is that we were trying to meet and where we were at. They wanted to add that into it, but I don't think it drastically changes the document. So I don't think it necessarily has to be redone right now, but I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in on that and give you the report on it.
Okay. All right, excellent. Questions from the council members? Is this something that you feel that we could push off until like November after we go through the budget process, or do we want to address any of this before the budget is?
I don't believe there's anything in there that would, their report we might talk about when we talk about budget stuff, but as for the SOC, the CRA, I don't think there's anything in there that would affect the budget. And like I said, I think my recommendation would be that at the end of the year, we'd be able to put in the new numbers for next year. Or for the numbers for 2024, we'd be able to put in the response numbers. And to me, that seems like the more appropriate time to have an update, if you will, to add the stuff. Like I said, there wasn't anything that was major that they wanted us to change. So that's why I think it could wait until, December, a January, February timeframe when we have the 24 numbers to add to it.
Okay, excellent. We should have a new engine by then too.
We should, yes. Last I heard is that was, they were talking August, September. Yeah, we actually did talk to the salesman, the vendor, and they were talking about planning visits to go out and look at the build. And everything's on track for August, September still, so.
Fabulous. That'll be exciting. All right.
The other piece of news, just to remark on the accreditation, is we're waiting, the next steps is we're waiting for the technical report to come back from the group so that we have an error of fact. We can look at it, see if there's any major changes. Other than that, we're set for our commission. I did hear that our commission hearing is going to be Monday, August 5th, I believe it is. That first Monday in August in Atlanta. And it's going to be like at 1:30. So in theory, it'd be a case of probably flying in on a Sunday, doing that on a Monday and coming back Monday night. But we can have a discussion a little bit later as to who might be going, who might want to go from the city to that commission hearing. But we did hear that it was going to be on Monday the 5th at 1:30.
Okay, excellent. Very well. Any other comments from committee? Okay, well, next we have a report.
I'll just say, I wasn't Captain Fouts was going to do the report on the fire. I was out of town when it happened. He was the one that was there and has most of the information. So I asked him to do a presentation on it. So I'm going to turn that over to Captain Fouts to tell you guys, give you a summary report on the fire that happened on Railroad.
Well, things were in good hands while you were gone, because to contain it to one building is a godsend.
They did an amazing job. So I will let him take it from there. Thanks, Chief.
Good evening, council. Let me share my screen here. There we go. Okay, in your agenda packets, you did receive a copy of the Snoqualmie Fire Significant Incident Report form. As part of being an accredited agency, one of the things that we like to do is we want to make sure we report out on any significant incidents that we face here within the city. Whether it's structure fires, technical rescues, major medical emergencies that have tremendous loss of life, et cetera. Things that reach those extreme risk classifications that we deal with on a periodic basis, but not all the time. And through this process, not only are we giving you a report about the fire itself, but we're also going to go ahead and touch on some of the accreditation components that tie into that make us an accredited agency and be data driven to show the whys of what we do, how we do it, and where we ended up. So taking a look, the fire was at 8103 Falls Avenue. We know that as the Chickadee Bake Shop, the Snoqualmie Pie Company, Littlest Wishes Photography, and then on 8102 Railroad Avenue, the Snoqualmie Ice Cream Company. So I'll briefly touch on a couple of different metrics. I'll talk about the incident itself, and then we'll move into the accreditation and the overall fire investigation. So a little bit of background on the incident itself. Initial call to 911 was at 5:07 in the morning, and it was a passerby that called in stating that they had flames above the building at the Snoqualmie Pie Company. And when you do a quick Google search of the area around that, Snoqualmie Pie Company didn't pop up right away as an address, which delayed locating the fire by the dispatch center by about 45 seconds. They had to quickly go through and figure out, okay, where exactly is Snoqualmie Pie? They utilized GPS coordinates from the phone call, narrowed it down to Railroad and River, and then were able to narrow it down just a little bit further. They located the address by 5:08, and by 5:09 and 16 seconds, they had dispatched out our initial response for a commercial structure fire. That initial response for us provides for 3 fire engines, 1 ladder truck, a battalion chief, and an aid car. One item of note here is that out of all the units that responded initially to the call, unfortunately, there was no Snoqualmie units on the initial dispatch. And that's because they were out on another emergency medical response, and they were tied up on that transport. So they were unable to be recommended for dispatch. But because of our dynamic dispatch system through CAD with Norcom, our communication center, and our mutual aid agreements and partnerships with our surrounding agencies, we were able to get the remaining closest resources available to us. Snoqualmie PD arrived on scene shortly after the initial dispatch because they smelled smoke in the air. So we had some very astute police officers in the area paying attention to what's going on, and they started to investigate, and they found a well-involved structure at 511. And after I get done with this slide, I'm going to show you what they saw, because it's the exact same thing that our aid crew saw returning from the response that they were on while they were in the middle of a medical transport. At 5:15, which is about 6 minutes after dispatch, initial dispatch of the call, which coincidentally is what we expect our travel time to be from our fire station to anywhere in the city. Our crews drove by and confirmed that we in fact did have a working fire on the back side of the building. They advised that it was on Falls Avenue, not the 8102 Railroad that was the initial dispatch. And they continued on their medical transport after they confirmed that it was a commercial structure and that there should be no occupants inside. Once they continued with their medical transport, they dropped the patient and they returned to the scene very rapidly. And I'll touch on their times here in just a moment. So this picture is important to recognize when we talk about the gravity of what they were dealing with. This picture was taken by our on-duty police officers as they pulled up to the scene to recognize exactly what they have. And one of the items that I want you to take note of is that there is heavy fire involvement on floor 2. But when you look at the first floor, you only see fire burning in 2 spots on the side of the wall closest to where the Falls Pharmacy is at. That's going to be important to remember when we talk about the fire investigation report and what the investigator determined as the final cause. But this is what we would consider to be a defensive fire, regardless of whether we showed up in 2 minutes or 8 minutes after initial dispatch. So to continue with the incident, once they did their drive around 360 and they got on the radio and confirmed that we in fact had the working fire, we dispatched out the remainder of what we call an effective response force. This is the fulfillment of a full first alarm assignment for the fire department, based on what our run cards dictate and what the numbers are that we've come together to determine what are the minimums for us to be able to fight a fire at one of these facilities. And that brought in a ladder truck from Redmond, an additional fire engine from Snoqualmie, another battalion chief, a medic supervising officer, a paramedic unit from North Bend, and it gave us our staff all call for all of Snoqualmie career and volunteer personnel. So what that did is that filled out the remainder of our effective response force, and that was at 5:15:46, right after the upgrade took place, because of, to be honest with you, a very astute lieutenant on the 8 car as he drove by. He knew that he had discernible time to be able to drive around and determine what needed to be done prior to continuing his transport. So a lot of credit to Ben Parker, the lieutenant who was on duty that evening. The first arriving engine was engine 187 from North Bend. They arrived at 5:19 and advised of fully involved structure fire with defensive fire attack in place. They established command and they started ordering additional resources and managing the scene appropriately. Now, I'm going to go back to this picture, and when you take a look at this picture, anybody who's paid attention to the history of our great country know that this is the kind of fire that creates urban renewal, for lack of a better term. This will burn down cities. It'll wipe out history. It has the potential to be absolutely devastating to a community. But the fact that we have such a creative and dynamic system here in King County, that is really what saved this structure. We had astute police officers. We had a very on-point lieutenant managing the crew and knew that he had discernible time. And we were able to contain this to the structure of origin. So now when I come back to this, we get to talk about a couple of big points. The fact is, and Councilmember Watton, you pointed it out right away, we limited it to one building. This is incredible for any downtown core in a city that has 100-year-old plus structures. The fire was limited to a single alarm, commercial response, and contained to the building of origin. Not only was it just limited to that building, we had no adjoining damages to any of the structures. There was a little bit of smoke in the pharmacy and a little bit of water from a water leak, but it was nothing that was not insurmountable for those businesses to be able to be put back in service to their community later in the day. The next piece is the building was unoccupied at the time of the fire. Being a commercial structure in a downtown core, this is not always the case. We know that these buildings that house multiple businesses many times have owners and occupants that will stay overnight because they're working on things, projects, things for customers, and we can't always guarantee that there's not going to be somebody in there. We were very fortunate that this was not the case tonight. There was nobody in there, and that we didn't lose any lives. We had no injuries, to include no firefighter injuries on the scene. And then the fire was contained and declared completely under control at 8:45 in the morning, just over 3 hours from initial dispatch. Again, a tremendous firefight that would have been very difficult had this been 15 years ago when I started and we were running 2-person engine companies. So let's talk about the impact, the overall impact to the city from this fire. As you can see, the building itself, and you've driven by and you've probably talked to the business owners, the building is considered to be a total loss. We've lost 4 businesses that potentially may not come back to the valley, and that's going to be up to the business owners depending on how they feel supported and cared for within this community. The property value of that structure, the property that it sits on, as well as the ice cream shop in the front, taxable value from the King County assessor is at $959,000 of value that essentially burned to the ground that day. Property loss estimates were $885,000, which is the structure itself, the property retaining, of course, $73,000 in value based on the fire investigators' determinations. When we look at the property loss, they also added in $500,000 estimated in contents and inventory for these businesses. So that's going to be important for them as they seek to recover and try to rebuild within either the city or somewhere nearby here in the valley to be supported in the long term. Now, one of the things that we do is we don't just look at our fire loss, we look at what we've saved overall. And as part of an accredited agency, we have to look at the bigger picture, because if we focus on the negative, we forget about managing what's the positive outcomes that came out of this. And touching on the comments from Councilmember Watton, knowing that we had the potential to burn down an entire city block, we truly did save quite a bit for this community, not only from a property standpoint, but from an economic impact to the citizens here, the businesses here, to the city organization, as well as to the valley as a whole. So when we take a look at the adjoining properties, based on King County assessor's values, the pharmacy was valued at $855,000. The florist on the other side, $324,000. Again, no loss on either of those buildings. Councilmember Cotton.
And the 100-year-old walnut tree at the florist was not even singed.
It was not even
Incredible.
singed.
Yeah.
Tremendous stop. We could have lost a historic tree. Absolutely. But when we take a look at these adjoining properties, the total property at risk for the community because of this fire was just about $2.1 million. We were able to save 1.2 of that, which is significant. That equates to about a 60% save rate overall, which I'll take those odds in Vegas just about any day. So moving forward, knowing this impact, there's a couple of things that we want to touch on. And we want to touch on the response overall from the fire department. And again, I touched on this earlier, and Chief Bailey spoke already about the standards of cover document that we have. And we have some items that we look at based on RCW 35103 that specifically outline our response objectives. And when we look at our first alarm full assignment for a commercial fire, we get 4 fire engines, 2 ladder trucks, an aid unit, 2 battalion chiefs, 1 medic unit, 1 medical supervising officer, which equates to approximately 25 personnel based on staffing levels for the agencies that surround and support us. When we look at our adopted effective response force, which is in our standards of cover document that Chief Bailey shared with you at a previous meeting he just spoke on, we've identified that we need a minimum of 17 personnel just to fill out the initial assignment to respond to a commercial structure fire. 17 personnel obviously is not in the cards for us to be able to pull out of the hat at 5:30 in the morning here in our community. So we definitely have to rely on our relationships with our neighboring partners, Eastside, Falls City, and surrounding entities. So 17 personnel is what we identify. And then we have to report on these things as outlined in 35103, which specifically talks about our agency turnout time, our response time for our first due engine, and then the third bullet point being the response time for that effective force for the first alarm assignment. And these are standards that have been in place since Mark Guerrero was our fire chief. These standards were adopted, I believe, in 2015 as the organization, and then presented to the council, I believe, in 2017 as part of our first standards of cover and annual report. So we've adopted a 90-second turnout time and a 6-minute and 30-second response time for the first arriving engine, which means from the time that we get dispatched to the time that we arrive to an alarm, we should show up in about 8 minutes. And that should be to all areas of the city. We'll fill that out with the first alarm assignment at 19 minutes and 15 seconds, which is 17:45 plus a turnout time for the respective agencies surrounding. So 8 minutes for the first engine, 19 minutes and 15 seconds for the first alarm assignment. The other 2 bullet points there speak to our EMS responses as well. So when we look at this and we compare this to our responses, you can look at that significant incident report. It's going to pop up here on the screen. And this outlines all the times for the agencies that responded. And we identify which unit was first, which was engine 187. They responded out the door 2 minutes and 41 seconds. Now, That's their turnout time. And while we have a 90-second standard, not all agencies maintain those standards, and we don't have control over how quick they get out the doors of their own fire stations. Go ahead, Councilmember.
Sorry, going back to the last slide, is that why there was an asterisk next to the ALS response time at the very
Yes,
bottom? Because it would be
so
coming from a
The
different.
ALS response
Okay.
asterisk is because we can get medics from all over the region.
Or
and
is
it's
it
a
one?
tiered system outside of our system.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
So when we go back to it, engine 187 was the first one to arrive, and they were out the door at 2:41. You can look at the second line, which is engine 187's travel time, and it was 7 minutes and 58 seconds, which gave us a total reaction time, which is that time from the alarm going off at the station to the time they arrive at 10 minutes and 39 seconds. When we compare that to our own responses, clearly that's going to be outside of our standard because they're responding from outside of our jurisdiction. And unfortunately, we can't dictate their times. We can only seek to shorten the times the best we can. Based on the photograph that we got from the police department of what they saw when they arrived and what our crew saw when they did their drive around before they did their transport, it wouldn't have mattered if we were there in 2 minutes or 10 minutes. The outcome would have still been the same. I have to give credit though to engine 187 because they were fast on their feet. They established a water supply and they immediately began aggressive defensive fire tactics. And that ultimately helped us stop the spread from the adjoining buildings. Now, when we take a look at it, we have those 2 times that we have to track, and that's that first unit and the ERF, which are the last 2 bullet points that we speak to here. Our effective response force, our goal is for 19 minutes and 15 seconds. We achieved 17 personnel on this incident at the 25-minute mark, which is going to be almost 6.5 minutes beyond what would normally be done. And to touch on that, that's because we didn't have our own resources on scene until late into the incident. We were busy with another call. Any questions on the accreditation and compliance piece before I move into the investigation? Okay. So the last piece of this is to touch on the fire investigation and the building facts. Known about the building is that it was built in 1928, 2 separate buildings. They were not joined together by a common doorway. It was later remodeled. They added in a door between the 2 buildings. And to touch on that, when we see remodels like that, many times those remodels have direct effect on fire and how it communicates throughout a building. We were very fortunate that when they did the remodels on this building, whatever that timeline was, we can't find the record on that, they followed code and they did not disturb the firewall in between the 2 buildings. Had that firewall been disturbed, we would have seen fire all the way through to the front from Railroad to Falls, which would have been absolutely devastating to that downtown block. So built 1928, balloon frame construction. And for those not familiar with the principles of building construction, balloon frame is where we have no fire stopping from the foundation all the way up to the attic space. So the stud bays that go in the walls go from the first floor all the way through the second floor. Fire can run hidden in the wall for long periods of time without ever being noticed. This is the only building in the city of Snoqualmie that we know of that is a true balloon frame construction, which means our local fire department, we were aware that we had that building there and it was pre-planned and in our brains for when that fire actually occurred. And that's one of the benefits to our organization is that we know our buildings. We know which ones to be prepared for people to be in. We know where there's construction dangers for us. The other 2 pieces to note on here is that there was no monitored alarm system or suppression system installed in the structure. While the structure had been remodeled time and time again, there was no updates into the fire suppression systems to bring it up into the current models of code. And that's because it didn't trigger any of those during the remodels when they pulled permits. In discussions with the building owner, she is committed to bringing it up when they rebuild into what the new code is going to be and putting in suppression and monitoring systems as well. From the fire investigation, we utilize King County Sheriff's Office as the investigating authority for the city of Snoqualmie. They ruled that the fire was accidental in nature, likely caused by an exterior wall mounted lamp fixture. Now, I'm going to take you back to that original picture of the fire. And when you look on the left side of that picture where the fire is burning down low, you can just barely see it. There's an air conditioning unit directly above one of the dumpsters mounted on the wall. This was an area of concern for the fire investigator as they went through the process. When we look at the next picture here, you can see that the firefighters are tearing apart the wall in two separate locations. One on the right where firefighter Peter O'Donnell is tearing into the wall near the power meters. And then on the left where you see a firefighter in black bunker gear that's tearing into the wall a little further over. He is standing right where that air conditioning unit was during the firefight itself. So that's an area that stood out to the fire investigator. Now, when we get into the investigation piece of it itself, there's a couple of things noted. These pictures were pulled from the King County Assessor's website. King County Assessor came out and took pictures the day after the fire and updated the website. So they were very responsive, especially when it comes to the taxes associated with these buildings. But the picture on the left is from what appears to be last year after they painted the structure. And you can see a yellow circle, and that's actually circling a light that was hanging off the side of the structure there. They had several of those throughout, and they are simple lights that you can pick up at just about any Home Depot store and install on your own home. And you take a look on the picture on the right, and there's an area with the most damage done during the fire. That just happens to be that same spot where that air conditioning unit was, as well as the lamp fixture that was mounted on the wall. Now, moving forward, I've got a video here, and this is from the Falls Pharmacy from their back door. And without this video, the fire investigator would have gone down a completely different path during his investigation. So there's two circles I want you to note. The one on the left is the fire, and it's directly above the air conditioning unit. And then the circle on the right, noting the timestamp, which puts it at about 4:48 in the morning, which is about 25 minutes prior to the dispatch of the crews. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video, and you can watch what has been going on for some time. There is no sound for the video, but you can see you've got material falling down onto the dumpsters next to the building. And it's a little dark on the screen up here, but you can see it better on your computer screens if you have it open. And if you're looking around, you can see over here where my cursor is, you can see reflection off the car that's parked directly behind the pharmacy of fire along the ridge line of the roof. Now, this fire on the left side in the yellow circle, that has already burned through not only framing of the structure, but 100-year-old tongue and groove siding that was put on there, plus plywood paneling. That's all old dimensional timber that takes a long time to burn. So for it to burn through at this point has likely been burning for an hour or more and working its way through the structure. Now, when you get to the next slide, well, when you go back to the fire investigator, or the initial picture that the police department had taken, and you look at that, and I'll scroll back just so you can see it, you realize that when that fire communicated directly up the wall from where that light fixture was and worked its way up into the attic space, which was really only about an 18-inch space over the second floor because it did have a flat roof, it burned undetected for some time before it finally breached and the neighbors were able to report it. Being a dark back road through downtown Snoqualmie, this fire likely had been burning since about 1 or 2 in the morning. And it worked its way through the old timber. It finally breached the building. And this is what people saw and started to report. And again, we got hyper focused on where that fire was burning on the left over by the air conditioning unit. So according to the King County Fire Investigator, he believes that the fire started in that stud bay where the light over on the left side of the structure is, right here in that yellow circle. He believes it started there. It burned up through the stud bay. That's the area with the most amount of damage in the building. It burned up into the attic space, and then subsequent collapse of the attic space into the second floor ignited the smoke and the unburned fuels in the second floor and turned into the global fire that we saw. Believes the fire was accidental, and that's where we ended with it. Now, the last piece I wanted to touch on for you after my video stops playing is I think that while it was devastating to our community to lose those businesses, I think from a city perspective, we need to be proud. We need to be very thankful for the people that were there that day, from our responders, our city staff, our administration, everybody that came to the scene that day. They all played a pivotal part in making sure that those business owners felt loved, appreciated, and taken care of as they dealt with the tremendous loss that they just dealt with. So we had people from not only the Snoqualmie Fire Department, but the police department to block traffic to recognize that there was a fire to begin with, and to quickly figure out that there's nobody inside those structures. The Snoqualmie Public Works Department. If you take a look at this picture, we have Lieutenant Matt West, we have Phil Bennett, and I have to apologize, I don't remember the gentleman's on the left's name, but he works directly with Phil. They came out after hours and they provided barricades to block the road. They helped us keep the storm drains clear, and they did everything that they had to prevent the runoff going into the river. So they protected the environment component of what we do. It's life, property, environment in that order. And we did what we had to make sure that we protected the surrounding areas. Phil and his partner did a great job of cleaning up debris off the street. We cleaned up debris off the back parking lot. Lieutenant West and the crew did a tremendous job of just being that extra set of hands on scene for the business owners as we waited for the board up company so they could secure what they had left of their livelihoods. The other pieces I wanted to touch on is that we had our city administration there. City Administrator Chambliss, Mayor Ross, we had elected officials who came out to the scene. Tremendous support for this community to see this loss and be there and grieve with them as they look to rebuild in the future. And then the last two pieces is our regional partners from the surrounding fire departments, Eastside Fire, Redmond, Bellevue, Falls City Fire Departments, as well as our partners at the King County Sheriff's Office. It's these partnerships that help us keep the city safe. It's these partnerships that make us unique in the challenges and the things that we face for our communities. So with that, any questions?
Excellent. Well done. Well done. Anything else, council? Okay. Thank you, Captain Fouts. Well done. That leaves us with Chief Lynch in about a minute and a half.
12 minutes. You have 12 minutes.
12 minutes? Well,
It's actually me.
okay, all right. Mr. Chambliss, please.
So we need to talk about the interlocal agreement for police services with North Bend. I'm gonna go really fast. So the current agreement for the police services, it's a flat fee contract, started in 2019 at 1.8 and some change. This year, the flat fee is 2.4 million and some change. And this requires coverage of at least one officer on duty within the city limits, 24/365. It provides for 8 police officers, 2 sergeants, 1 records clerk, and 50% of a school resource officer. And it requires police services and associated duties. The term of it is, and it could be extended upon mutual agreement. The term ends on December 31st, 2024, unless terminated, but there's actually another paragraph there. And what this paragraph says that if it is not terminated come January 1st, it automatically renews for another 5-year period. So that's an interesting wrinkle in our work here. This goes over the details about terminating an agreement. Either side may terminate the agreement at any time. And once that letter is received, the agreement will continue to run for 18 months. So there's an 18-month transition period. And during that transition period, if there's a trigger for a new year, there's a 5% difference between the previous year's pay rate. That's all pre-negotiated. The other thing that was interesting about this contract is it pre-negotiated the renewal terms. Kept staffing levels at the same. It covers 12% of the chief and the captain. The population of North Bend is about 35% of the population of Snoqualmie. So if you base the contract on population, 12% is not really even Steven. Each city is required to pay their own dispatch services in the negotiation. Remember, we got a flat fee, right? Establishment of an ER&R fund, field repair and insurance costs, office overhead. But they said they'll take care of that by providing spaces in City Hall. So it's not really a value that's charged. And then the key thing is that Snoqualmie would be fully compensated for the services. North Bend is in the process of contracting with a consultant to conduct a feasibility study to see if it's feasible to stand up their own police department. The council has appropriated $60,000 to complete this work, and this work will take up to a year to complete. They have requested verbally that we consider extending the agreement one more year. Some analysis about extending the contract for one more year. It does create uncertainty in our 2-year budget process, which we are engaged in currently. Failing to renew the contract will require significant budgeting and staffing revisions during our next biennial budget. And it would also continue the estimated imbalance of compensation between the two cities of about $1 million. So 2025, if you just apply COLA to the numbers in the contract, would be 2.5 million. But our finance department has calculated actual costs to Snoqualmie, and it appears to be about 3.5 million. Now that was calculated at 35%, which is based on population. There are many different ways to do it. We could do calls for service. There's many different ways to slice that onion. We chose population because that's usually how it's done. It also includes 50% of a detective and 50% of the administrative sergeant, because neither of those were in the staffing count, yet the majority of our detectives cases are over in North Bend, and our admin sergeant is supporting North Bend operations. So no action tonight. This is just a preview, but one of the things that I would like you to think about is possibly countering their request. These are the new numbers that were run by finance. And I think it would be fair to insert a new clause in there about a true up clause. So March 1st, I'm told by finance, they can tell us exactly how much it cost. So if we overcharge North Bend, we send them a check. If we undercharge North Bend, we send them a bill, which to me is fair. And this is all based on the 35% number and then the 50% of those two positions.
Right.
I'm going to present this again tomorrow night at F&A, and then Chief Lynch will be presenting it to the full council on Monday night for discussion and comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, in the interest of time, please, if you have any comments, forward those to Mr. Chambliss and the mayor. With that, because we are at the end of our agenda, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
So moved by Councilmember Cotton, second by Councilmember Christensen. Hearing no objections, we are adjourned at 5:56 PM. Thank you.